Okay, so I'm going to call to order Mayor's Task Force meeting number 4. In honor of the Liwatul, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwat Nation. I'm going to go back and forth to the screen. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Jay, seconded by Judith. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from meeting number 3, moved by Ryan, seconded by Meredith. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the previous meeting? 4th. Okay, so seeing nothing, we'll get right into it. And so number 5, we called current and pressing issues. So maybe to just set the table a little bit for this part of the conversation, after our last 2, call them subcommittee meetings, where we broke into our 2 groups, which I thought were both very productive and very interesting, and really interesting to see where we landed. We've come up with some, as we're calling them, big ideas for both the groups, some focus to work on, and action, all that sort of thing. And in reviewing the meetings after and further discussion and thought about it after, I think the big ideas are great, and I look forward to digging in to see what we can, how we can further those ideas in today's meeting and after. But one of the things that sort of kept coming into my head when we were talking on the subcommittee meetings and then again after is, we set out with a very ambitious sort of mandate with this group. We wanted to be broad. We wanted to look at everything from mental health and social services to business and et cetera, which I think is great. And then we split up and we ended up zooming in on, again, a couple of big ideas. Through the process, we did the thought exchange. We engaged the community. We've been talking to our other residents. And there's a lot of concerns on the table. Now, obviously, we as a group cannot manage, everything that's coming up from the community, from the pandemic, moving forward. But it was really interesting to me as we were waiting for people to join. I'm listening to you parents with younger kids, and you're talking about school and homeschooling and all that sort of thing. And I think it was Meredith that said this is probably the single biggest stress for young parents at this point. So as much as I really want to dig into the big ideas, and we will, I just was concerned that we would risk losing sight of a lot of the other stuff that's going on out there. So again, you've seen the big ideas, and we'll talk about them, but they don't include, for instance, daycare or homeschooling or stress for parents, or and there's no way we can tackle everything as a group. But I feel like this, part of the, and I know we're also all hungry. I feel like we're all on the same page in that we all want to be productive through this group and get some good work done. So we want to see some tangible results, obviously. But I feel like when we set out, we want to be able to have conversations about all the other, not all the, but many of the other issues that are pressing on the table right now. So again, the childcare and going back to school and the risk involved and all that sort of thing as one. I think it's really important for this group to make sure that we allow ourselves time or space and ability to have conversations around some of those other issues. So we call them current and pressing issues. And I'm going to check in with all of you in a second to see if you have anything that sort of come up in the last couple of weeks, conversations you might have had, opportunities that might have come up. So we could do a quick round table, put your hands up, whoever has some thoughts to add. But I just want to make sure as we move forward, I wanted to check in with all of you, first of all, to see if you feel similarly. I would like to make sure that we, again, leave time and space to have, even if it's just conversations, to break down some of these other issues a little bit and discuss what work's being done out there, what initiatives there are, any way we can support. We talked a lot about, and it's interesting, one of the big ideas we came up with was this hub idea. And Jay, I know you weren't on that call, so I'm interested. I think this ties into your line of work as well. hear what you have to throw in when we get there. So the physical hub, I think, is a great idea, and I like the way we got to it. But I feel like this group, like as I mentioned in the very first meeting, I found the village became a bit of a hub throughout the pandemic to um, um, connect people to the information, disseminate the information, translate it, give them some guidance, gives them direction where they could find whatever they need. And I feel like this group was sort of about that as well. We're all connected to different parts of the community, and that's why we're all in one virtual room together. So I think if we can have those conversations where we sit down and again, break down these other projects that we'd like to look at, but can we also go, hey, Meredith, Jane, myself, or whatever, let's have another offline meeting, the three of us, to talk about daycare, and Judith and Aaron and Jackie to talk about whatever, just to brainstorm a little bit or talk about what work is being done in the community to see if we could help tie it all together. Does that make sense so far? Do you guys understand where I'm going? I just, again, really didn't want to lose sight of a lot of the other important stuff that's come out. And it also made me sort of pause and go, okay, well, Mike, are you too ambitious? Like, is that too much for this group? And I don't want to overtax us. Again, I feel a big part of this group is our connections to others. So if we feel that, if we come up with a topic or we don't come up with a topic that has come up to us through the community to look at, again, it might be as simple as somebody putting up their hand and go, oh yeah, well, I already do work with so-and-so and so-and-so, and we can coordinate and take it further along. But I think we need to break down some of the other challenges a little bit to see, and by the way, there's a lot of work being done out there, and we have this as an agenda item just to talk about some of the advocacy and work that is being done on some of the stuff. So for instance, two of the big themes that came up that I use as an examples have been childcare and transit. Those are big issues for everybody that have really risen to the surface again throughout the pandemic. Transit, I don't think this group needs to spend a lot of time on because there's a lot of work being done, but I need to fill you in as to what that work is. And if there's, and in doing so, if that results in I also can help with that advocacy bit because Sea to Sky Community Services has a connection to, or the chamber has a connection to, or you know what I'm saying? So I think part of these conversations would be, wow, there's a lot done. Let's just get it out, flush it out so we understand what is being done and how we can sort of pass that information on to anybody that might ask us that or inform further conversations. So along those lines, we were thinking, again, on this agenda, you'll see current pressing items. We thought, Jill and Nikki took the thought exchange. We don't want to lose sight of that. We feel like that's the connection to the community that we opened up. So they took the information out of the thought exchange and sort of put it in a spreadsheet form for us to look at, just so that it's always current for us, so that we always remember, okay, we haven't even talked about this yet. Don't have time this meeting, might be the next one, but it's still there. So the thought was, let's have an agenda item on these meetings which allow us to, as a group, say, oh, this is a new thing that I've talked to, my fellow seniors about, or some young parents about, or whatever. And I think it's something that we should put on our radar or have a conversation about now, or perhaps if there's a smaller group that wants to talk about it. So an agenda item with that, the current and present items, and then that also ties into the thought exchange spreadsheet that keeps those concerns of the community current, because that is who we're here to work for. So we want to make sure we're still in touch with that. So that's how we thought we would approach that. Again, it might result in a few of us going, hey, let's go set up another little meeting for those that have time. And I really don't want to overtax you guys. So the expectation isn't everybody has to now take on another aspect. If you feel you have a connection to childcare or transit and you want to be part of that conversation, and there's there's a few of you, let's sit down and have that conversation and bring back some of the results of that discussion to this group to see, if either we can connect people to services or just, further the discussion along. So without overtaxing you, my hope is that's where we end up. My hope is that at the end of today, we've broken down our big ideas. We've all got some perhaps tasks or direction that we can take on those big ideas, as well as, yes, I want to participate in a conversation about A, B, or C. So does that make sense? Here's a better question. Is that too much? for all you guys? Do you think that's too much for us to handle? Seeing a lot of shaking, no?
I think it's good because it's building off what we're already doing and making connections, and that makes sense. It's going to help move things forward rather than adding extra work that's on top of everything else.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, Meredith, is it's the fact that we have those connections, right? Again, that's one of the reasons we brought this brain trust, so to speak, together, is not just because you're all creative thinkers, but also because you have connections to these aspects of the community that I'm hoping we can engage others. You know, when we talked about, and I'm drifting into another agenda, but when we talked about the hub and the social, we talked about volunteerism and trying to promote that and get more people, you know, involved in this sort of work. So I think that's part of it, right? Like, you know, we want tangible action, but we have to, I think, have conversations that lead to, hey, I know somebody that would be really interested in helping out on that. I mean, I think we could all, most of us could come up pretty quickly with somebody who would like to participate in a discussion around daycare or feel that they can contribute. Or so I think those connections are really, really important in the work that we're doing. So if everybody's good with that, maybe we can either go roundtable or you can just put up your hands, but let's just have a conversation about, oh, I lost you. There you are. Let's have a conversation about any pressing issues that you guys have thought about, or we're calling them pressing issues, and then the thought exchange, and we'll go from there. Judith, go ahead. You're on mute, Judith.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, it's connecting two issues. Homelessness, because people won't be able to go to the library as they used to all day. There's a lot of couch surfers, and they used to spend all day in the library. That's not happening. And to connect with the kids, although the library wasn't supposed to be a childcare thing, after school, lots of parents relied on the library for their kids to go to before they got home from work. That won't be available. So for anybody looking at the kids thing, I think that's an issue. And are they going to be warming shelters for homeless people? You know, I don't know what Sea to Sky Community Service does, or if there is anything. And I don't know the extent of it, to be honest. So, but I do know that lots of people would spend all day in the library. So those are two issues I was going to bring up.
Thanks, Judith. And I think I'm put words in your mouth, but I would assume that Jay might have a little information in terms of homelessness in the area and the impacts on that right now.
Yeah, certainly not from a number standpoint, though, Mike, we are, and I can bring that back to the team in terms of what we're seeing. And I would say I appreciate, Judith, it's maybe at a higher level, it's, you know, connecting these issues so that we can almost take a preventative lens as the colder months start to hit. And people are seeking shelter in ways that they are used to seeking. And those mechanisms like the library are just not available. From a prevention standpoint, you know, what can we as a table, or what mechanism can we put in place to communicate that or provide a secondary area for shelter? Or simply just taking a break from the cold, as I know that the library serves in terms of purpose. And Judith, I should maybe mention that you and I have been having some chats around getting conversations again from a prevention standpoint around seniors. So I think it goes to, you know, ways in which this table, based on the minds that we can put together, can connect dots and folks together so that we can have a conversation about what prevention would look like as we enter into perhaps another surge or the colder months that add a certain lens or, you know, certainly more complications as the months go on into the winter.
Jay, this Friday between 11:30 and a bit later in Pioneer Park, 27 seniors are going to be getting together at distance for a lunch. So it might be an opportunity. I will be there. If you would like to join us to discuss some of those things, I think it would be great.
I think I saw them the last time I was up in Pemberton. So I was blown away by the number of folks getting together at such good social distancing practices as well. So yeah, let's talk about that offline. Thanks, Judith.
Yeah, I'll give you a call. Everybody was wearing a mask other than when they were eating. So
When is that, Judith?
It's this Friday in Pioneer Park,
Right.
11:30, Mike.
Okay, thanks. I've got Mark and Jill who've got some comments. I just want to give a really quick recap to Rodney, catch him up where we're at. We just had a really quick discussion, Rodney. I was just bringing up the fact that, you know, we've landed on these two sort of big ideas that we want to explore and looking for some tangible results, but not wanting to lose sight of many of the other issues that were brought up either through a thought exchange, through this group's input, through community conversation, and how we can sort of continue to focus on some of those issues as well as our big ideas in a realistic way, without overtaxing this group, without over demanding on time. And I was saying that I think, you know, a big part of the solution to that will be to have some smaller conversations, but it's our links to other aspects of the community that will help us sort of keep some of those conversations going. So we said we would have an item on the agenda like this every time that sort of allows people to bring up any current issues or new thoughts or reoccurring thoughts that are just been reinforced. But while we were all waiting to get on here, you know, again, there's a conversation between younger parents about what to do about school and all that stuff. And so these are ongoing conversations. I think none of us want to lose sight of those conversations. So just trying to figure out how we can do that in a realistic way without being too much for all of us. So the thought was have this agenda item, Nikki and Jill put a spreadsheet together with the thought exchange so that it's always current and always front of mind. And then hopefully through conversation today, as well as on the big ideas, we can come up with a bit of a plan or some side dialogue on some of these issues. So I'll go Mark and then Jill and then Meredith.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to raise a couple of little, well, I guess they're becoming significant issues. With the closure of Joffrey, what we're seeing is a much bigger use of, let's say, semaphore, Tankwell, even Keyhole has seen quite a few people up there because it's unmonitored, because, you know, nobody's managing that situation up at Keyhole. So we're getting reported by some of our members what's going on. Semaphore, as some of you might be aware of, could probably hold a dozen vehicles. And a couple weekends ago, we were up to 90 vehicles up there, including some Teslas. So just wondering how they're getting their butts up there. Tanko is in much of the same situation. So I know it's late in the game, but I would like to try to make a push to see if we can get Joffrey open managed, and take pressure off of these other areas. Once discovered and once, you know, posted on social media, we're going to fall into the same problem that we have with Joffrey at these other places. So I just wanted to raise that. The second piece, that Tourism Pemberton is responsible for a campaign that we've launched. It's a midweek campaign. We're looking to invite guests to come and stay during midweek. We're seeing enough tourists on the weekend. So to work with and help out our members, we've launched a campaign with Georgia Strait and social media with discounted options for the stays, for the eats, for activities. So I wanted to keep you in the loop on that one as well.
Thanks, Mark. listening to Mark talk about Joffrey, so one of the other things that we talked about prior to the meeting was through these, we'll call them side discussions or smaller discussions that we might have, or this part of the agenda, wondering what we could do. Some of it is just going to be straight up advocacy, and it's how we can coordinate that advocacy so it can be as strong as possible. So if it's something like Joffrey, that there's an agreement that we want to push to, okay, well, how do we advocate? How do we advocate for better wages for daycare? Or, how do we do a stronger, a more powerful job of the advocacy piece? So when we're having these discussions, sort of coming up with a filter that says, okay, this is an advocacy thing. This is a hub or a connectivity thing, connecting people to a service. This is an actual tangible action sort of issue. So I think that's an important way, because again, we're going to hear all these things coming up from people and go, well, what can we do about that? Some of it might just be coordinated, not just, but be coordinated advocacy. Some of them are going to have different actions coming out of them. And just a really small side note on that, Mark, I had some friends come into town. They ended up staying in Whistler because it was, and they were here midweek because it was significantly cheaper to get a hotel in Whistler than in Pemberton. Just so you know. So these people came up to visit me in Pemberton, but stayed in Whistler. So if we're trying to attract tourists midweek, I think we need to look at our pricing. I'm glad to hear you got a discount as part of this campaign for people to come stay here, because I've heard that a number of times. How come it's cheaper to stay at the Listel in Whistler than the Pemberton Hotel on top of the pub? So it's an interesting fact. I got Jill and then Meredith.
Yeah, so Judith's point made me think about back to some of the comments that we saw in the thought exchange. And it sort of made me think of that colder weather scenario that we're going to have fairly soon. I think about, people having to line up for groceries. I think about, like you pointed out, Judith, for kids, a place for kids to go in the colder weather, as well as some of our displaced and things like that. And so it was interesting because one of the sort of like easy sort of suggestions that I saw on the thought exchange was connecting with the grocery store to see if they had thought about doing like, I guess it's similar to Save On, where you can send in your order and you can pick it up outside, or perhaps a delivery service. And I thought, isn't that sort of like just a simple action that we can do to check in with our 2 grocery stores to see if that's an option? And that kind of ties into what you were speaking to, Judith, is just like the cold weather is going to present some challenges for many people, not only seniors, but perhaps single moms, youth and so forth. So, maybe that's something that we could think about, is like, what are some actions that we can do around, mitigating some of the issues that the cold weather is going to present to our residents.
So there's a good example of, an issue coming up that it's not advocacy. It could be a way of, one of us reaching out to either the grocery stores or something like that. So I don't call it a low-hanging fruit, but a fairly easily actionable item. I think that's a really good point, and I'm very concerned about when it gets cold as well. Meredith.
Yeah, I echo those concerns about when it gets cold and people have to, spend more time indoors. How do we deal with that? From the Chamber's perspective, I just wanted to say childcare is a huge advocacy sort of focus for us. We just recognize that parents can't work if they don't have childcare, and that is a really big focus from our board. We're actually just putting the final touches on a letter to you, Mike, and council, and to the SLRD, just outlining our concerns and some of the recommendations. We have some policies as well through the BC Chamber of Commerce at the provincial and federal level that we're trying to move forward as well. The other thing I just want to let everybody know too, today the BC Chamber of Commerce, and just to give everyone a bit of background, like your local Chamber of Commerce is a member of the BC Chamber of Commerce, who's then a member of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So it's a really great network to be able to take issues from the local community and bump them up through the provincial and the federal level. So the BC Chamber of Commerce has just put out a press release today and announced like a 50-something point plan to help small businesses. and it's recommendations for like at the provincial level of different things that can be done to help support small businesses through this. So of course, as the Chamber of Commerce, help, supporting businesses locally and, through, helping ease government regulations and different recommendations is important, but things like childcare all fall under this. But I've put a copy of the document in the Mayor's Task Force folder under Chamber of Commerce. So it's quite lengthy, but it has a lot of really good information that would be to have a closer look through for anyone that's interested in more. And then from the Chamber perspective too, like I think we recognize that the summer everyone's been able to get out, but we do think in the fall we're not going to have as many visitors, just a natural drop off in tourism happens, and we want to keep everybody buying local and focused on that. So we're looking at continuing with our Love Pemberton Buy Local campaign, and just trying to amplify that and give people some more tactical recommendations how they can support local businesses, and just putting that back in everyone's consciousness as we go into the fall and the winter.
Yeah.
And then of course, transportation is a big focus for us, but I think like Mike said, it's not something that we can move here. So those are our big things.
So the daycare, and again, in advocacy, I don't know, I know Jill and Nick, you're taking notes, and as we go through, Nikki's going to run down a little bit later about some of the work or advocacy the village is doing. Maybe at that point, if there's anybody in the group that feels that they could lend strength to the advocacy, whether again it's through Sea to Sky Community Services or chain, whatever, let's sort of put that on in the notes, and we could connect offline about it. Because Meredith, I want to make sure that we are sending the same messages when it comes to childcare through the BC Chamber, through the province. And again, we'll tell you what some of the work we're doing, but we're trying to set up ministers' meetings for September on a number of issues. So when I walk into those meetings or virtually walk into those meetings, if I'm armed with some of the stuff that you guys are doing or some of the issues and we're all aligned, we'll be that much more effective. So
yeah, we
if anybody
totally
else
agree.
feels they could jump in, Aaron, if you guys are doing work, whatever, just please let us know where you could support any of that advocacy. And as for the tourism, and Mark, again, your midweek campaign, I think that's great. My sense is we are going to see a very steep decline in 2-3 weeks in terms of visitation here. The visitation I've been seeing has been younger families, 20-some-year-olds. Normally in the fall when kids go back to school, that's when seniors and Europeans start to travel more, and that really sustains the tourism throughout the fall until you get into winter. We're not going to see much of that this year. I feel like when kids go back to school, we'll still see some activity on the weekends, but I think we're going to see a steep decline. As crazy as it's been on some of these weekends, I think that's going to go away pretty darn quick in a few weeks. So I'm a little concerned about that. Judith, and then Aaron.
I'm prepared to go and talk to both grocery stores and see if I can get something going there, because when we first came back from Mexico, they delivered for 2 weeks while we were in isolation. And so I'm sure we could work out something. So leave that one with me and I'll take that on. Unfortunately, I'm away first 2 weeks of September, but hopefully I can get something going.
Maybe you can connect with Jill a little bit on that. And we also, back in March, April, started coordinating with the Lions Club to do some delivery as well. So maybe they should be included in that conversation as well.
Yeah,
I knew that they were doing that for seniors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think they should be part of that. Erin?
Yeah, so just talking with friends and community members, a big trend I'm seeing right now is COVID fatigue. And things are now just starting to ramp up. Kids are going back to school. Parents are having to make these decisions. And it's kind of like this hopelessness of, we've just been through this. I don't have anything else to give. or I can't cope anymore going into the fall and how's the flu season going to be. So a big piece is this COVID fatigue and burnout, especially with the essential service workers. A couple friends that work in the liquor store, a couple friends that work in grocery stores. My work, not even like the clients we're working with, it's the essential service workers. We just all seem to be burnt out. We take, go on vacation and we come back and it's like, oh yeah, we're still in the trenches. So this is a big theme I'm noticing with a lot of people, and I'm not really sure how to help, support, or if there's a way we can boost morale somehow. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Just a theme that I noticed as well. I don't know if anyone has heard about the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, that there's some money, like $31 million that communities can apply for. I don't know if that applies, but just thought I'd share that too.
That's awesome.
I can just speak to that too, Erin. I did some investigating. I was looking on the website. And so what's the point where they're at right now with that fund is they've got this pot of money, and then nonprofits can apply to the government to sort of be the distributor of those funds. And so then once, I guess, and I think it's maybe one organization per province, perhaps. And so then once they've got that nonprofit that's going to distribute the money, then that nonprofit will do the call for applications. So it sounds like we're a little ways away yet, but I saw that, and Meredith actually flagged it as well. And we were thinking, oh, that could be, great to support some of the work that we're doing, or some of the, community projects that are shovel ready and could really support the community as well. So yeah, so hopefully we'll have more news on that very soon.
I'm with you 100%, Erin. That's one of my biggest concerns is the fatigue. I'm feeling it. I'm having a hard time managing staff at our business at this point because they're tired of being frontline and having to manage people's behavior. And it's still gorgeous out. So on every level, from parents being able to go out to the pump track and watch their kids rip around on their little bikes and just get out of the house for an hour and a half, to and no longer being able to do that because it's end of November and it's crappy out, or standing in line and waiting for stuff, everything in between. I feel like fatigue and resulting intolerance, it's one of my biggest concerns. And I think we can apply that or consider that in everything we're talking about. So when we get into the big ideas, we talk about our hub, we talked about, the extending on the Love Permanent campaign on the other side. I think that has to be an element or a consideration, because it's one of my single biggest concerns is that fatigue, for sure. Anybody else? So maybe what we could do is have, Joe, are you able to screen share the spreadsheet? Maybe what we could do is have a quick look at the spreadsheet, or we could do it at the end, depending on what the group wants. Again, my thought was, let's very soon in the meeting, dig into the big ideas, sort of distribute some tasks or volunteer for what we want to do, and then look at some of these conversations and the spreadsheet and say, okay, again, I'll have a meeting offline with you and you and you. Nikki, you got a thought?
Yeah, one of the things, we didn't do anything to this spreadsheet, and where we thought we could do next, we wanted to flag it. But I think there's some parts that we need to separate where we could put into those short, medium, long-term action advocacy. I'm not sure, I mean, if everyone wants to go through it now, that's fine, but it's what, 78 lines long, which is, for me, quite overwhelming. So I don't know I think we wanted to bring it out to say, does everyone still want to keep this active and alive? And can we sort of finesse it a bit to see what we can achieve and accomplish, and then kind of break off? And we can even send it out by email if we wanted to keep it going. I don't know if we want to necessarily get through it line by line right now, because there's a lot in there.
That's a good point. And we're already 49 minutes in here. So that's a good point. Are we comfortable sort of having a look at that spreadsheet on our own, and through maybe email, getting together and going, yeah, I would love to have a conversation with anybody who wants to talk about daycare, or I would love to have a conversation, or I will do the approach to grocery stores on the following item. Do we think we can do that via email, or do we need to break it down more here is my question?
I can put it in a Google Doc too, so it can be a document that we can share, and it'll be continually updated.
So, or maybe I didn't see many responses. Maybe we can move into the next items, and then if there's time left, we can circle back on it now. If not, we could do it over email. Or
I think Aaron was going to say something.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, you weren't? Sorry, I saw a hand.
I think it was Ryan, but I think we need to do, if you can just give us a couple days maybe to tweak it a little bit to make it a more shareable document. I think it'll be easier to digest a little bit. We won't lose anything, but we'll just sort of group them where it might be easier for people to go, oh, I got this one, or we can provide an update to say where the village is working on some stuff or something like that.
Okay, so maybe why don't we move on to just a quick review of the advocacy the village is doing, and then we can dig into our big ideas for a little bit. The last item on the agenda is the next step, so we could circle back and talk about the next steps, and anybody could either volunteer or make suggestions for some of these side conversations. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay, so let's just very quickly talk about a few of the pressing issues that the village is already looking at and advocating towards. Nikki, did you want to lead that?
Yes, I've printed off the quick little briefing notes that we submit. So what the local governments need to do to request minister meetings at UBCM each year is we just need to put a little paragraph together advising what the topic of discussion is going to be. So I just want to read them. There's 3 that pertain to sort of what we're working on in this group. And again, they're really short, but just to give you guys an understanding of what we've made the request. We haven't heard back yet to see if we've been granted the requests, and we don't always get those meetings. So the first one is regarding to childcare needs in Pemberton. So I'll just read it, it's easier. A recent childcare needs assessment and strategy prepared by Spark BC found that Pemberton has over 30% less childcare spaces per 100 children than the provincial average. This dire situation can be attributed to continued low wages, which are inequitable to the high demanding profession and to low accessibility to required training, particularly in rural communities. Private licensed providers face the additional hindrance of being ineligible for provincial grant funding for facilities. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the urgency to address the shortage, as neither municipalities nor the province can hope to achieve economic recovery if parents are unable to work. So that's what we have asked to talk about. And obviously this is one of the things I think from my, something that I've learned that I wasn't aware of, and I think both Jill and Mike can appreciate and feel the same way, is we weren't quite aware of how much our childcare providers were earning on sort of an hourly basis, which is, you know, $15 an hour. That's, anyway, that is a serious problem. And I know that it's also hard to say, oh, well, you need to come back and be a frontline worker when, why do that and risk, you know, you're worried and then you have CERB. So there's a lot of competing problems that COVID have driven even more to the forefront, and something we definitely want to address when we meet with the minister. So we're really hoping we get this particular meeting, of course. Do you want to, Mike, do we want to, if there are any questions, or do we want to wait till the end, or how do we?
No, if there's any either questions or, oh, I can add to that. And again, it doesn't all have to happen here. If somebody says, you know, before you go to that minister's meeting, Mike, let's talk, because I can give you some more information or numbers or whatever, that would be helpful. But yeah, any thoughts or questions on that meeting?
Like from the chamber perspective, I think that's amazing. Like, we'd love to see you get that meeting. And I think you'll find everything that we provide you with will be in line with what you guys are thinking as well, like I just said.
Okay. Ryan?
Mike, one thing that's come to light recently is when kids are getting into daycare or kindergarten, the daycare won't take them. So there's about a week or 2 week gap where new kids going into kindergarten have no care because they do a graduated entry. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of parents that have to take time off in vacation, or have to get another parent, or sorry, not a parent, or a grandparent or a nanny or something to look after their children so they can still go to work. Now, I'm not sure if that's a daycare policy that they've instituted, or if that's a provincial policy. It's definitely one of those things that's going to be around despite COVID. Mm-hmm. where parents can't take their kids to kindergarten for the first week school is open.
And that has been like that for many years. I remember when my kids, one of who graduated this year, was in daycare, I had to take time off.
Yeah.
Actually, it was only half day daycare at that time, or half day kindergarten at that time.
Yeah.
So at least they've expanded that program to have kindergarten full day, but it definitely is an issue.
And
It
that's,
definitely is. And I think it has to do with their licensing. They're only licensed for certain ages.
yeah.
And so I know the daycares don't really run even the after school, which would maybe open up a little bit more of those age groups.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's something that Mike can take to his ministers' meetings, because if it's provincial policy, then maybe they could just open it up. Because I know, like I said, that week won't go away, but despite COVID or what have you. So that might be something to.
Okay, let's flag that. We could talk about that some more if I have that in my head when I get in there. So.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Meredith. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. One additional thing I just wanted to say is we identified on our advocacy committee when we were talking about childcare too, is just, and we touched on it already here, the aftercare being really important. Like it's really hard to get aftercare, like that 5 to sort of 10, 11-year-old age. It's just really hard to find aftercare programs after school while you're still working, and that's a really missing area. Like I know it's like gold for people to get into the official aftercare program, and then people, like we were saying, use the library just to let the kids, you know, run around. But you know, what else is there? Like I know there's potentially like some skateboard clinics that are going to go on after school, but that's a good addition this year, that you know we've got something, you know, more that kids can be doing after school and be supervised.
Yeah, community centers running at 20-30% capacity don't help that either. Okay, anything else on childcare? Again, we're not trying to solve it here, just so you understand the advocacy we're doing. Okay, Nikki, go ahead.
Okay, the next one relates to affordable housing. So this is finding solutions to the affordable housing crisis in Pemberton is a strategic priority of council. To inform its action plan in 2019, the Village Commission on Affordable Housing Needs Assessment, which identified severe housing gaps for seniors, low and moderate income individuals, including single parents and vulnerable residents. In addition to the high human cost of homelessness, without accommodation for entry-level employees, our local businesses and economy also suffer. The village is working hard to achieve the plan's goals, which includes building partnerships that can lead to the development of affordable housing projects.
So just to add to that, this meeting, when we discussed asking for the meeting, we weren't actually in 100. We basically wanted to do so to bookmark the opportunity to. There's a couple projects we're working with the Lions on a potential next phase of the Lions Villa, and there might be another community group we're working with to hopefully look at some affordable housing and other services. So we wanted to bookmark this meeting in case in the likely case that we wanted to advocate for some grant funding to support some of these projects. So those 2 projects in particular, but the others coming as well, but that's what this meeting is about. Any questions? Okay, that's the last one.
And the last one is impacts of increased tourism in the Pemberton area. So outdoor tourism in the Pemberton Valley has a positive impact to the local and provincial economy. Sadly, overcrowding and other irresponsible behaviors have the potential to close or destroy popular areas, which are now in even higher demand as we opt to vacation in our own backyards, and some larger provincial parks remain closed. The province needs to match its investment in marketing of these assets with investment in regular patrols to educate the public and protect the environment. Now more than ever, we need boots on the ground to avoid additional emergency management expenses caused by wildfire or loss of outdoor attractions as the tourism economy struggles to recover.
Any thoughts on that? And again, if there's thoughts after the fact, please feel free to reach out to myself and Nikki and Joe, and we can have a conversation about it. And then there's one other meeting that I've asked for, but we're doing it through the regional district, and that is with the Premier and the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure about transit. And really quickly, those that aren't aware, you know, we've built this partnership with, you know, all the way from Leeward, Pemberton, Whistler, Squamish Nation, and SLRD area C and D. So basically from Furry Creek to Mount Curry, to Liwat, we've come together, we've done a lot of work, and I can fill anybody in who wants more detail after, to try to put this transit system in from all the way up and down the corridor. We've talked, as usual, the biggest problem is funding. We had proposed partial funding through a fuel tax. The NDP government did not want to support that. They were scared of adding tax, and this is all prior to the pandemic. Now things have changed with the pandemic, but I think we've seen that transit has again risen to the surface even more through COVID. So we've requested a meeting. I've had a couple meetings, and when I say we, there's usually myself, the mayor of Squamish, Chief Dean joined me on some of them. So it depends on who we are or who we're meeting with, but a number of us have met with ministers a couple times, and we've been asking for a meeting with the premier because we're not getting where we want with the minister. So we've got a request in with the premier on that topic as well. So just so you know, we collectively are banging that drum as loud as we can still. We're not letting that one go. Any questions? Okay. Anyway, that's just to give you guys an idea of the work that's gone on. If you could feel you could support that advocacy at any point, please let us know. So we'll move on to number 7 then. And this is a review of our proposed ideas, allocations of resources. So in other words, the 2 big ideas, let's, sort of present them to each other. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges with any idea we come up with is the resources involved. So that's going to be a big part of our conversation. How did we want to break this down here? Do we have a plan for this, Jill? In terms of presenting the work from our 2 big ideas?
No official plan on how to present this. Did everyone have a chance to review the big ideas document? So, perhaps we could just generally see what the sentiment is around these 2 ideas. And then once we sort of get buy-in, or if there is buy-in for these 2 ideas, then maybe we can start to look at each of the individual line items and just see if they're appropriate or not, and if there's someone that want to take those on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does anybody? It does make sense to me. Obviously, does it make sense to everybody else? Do we want to maybe have somebody from each group speak briefly to the idea?
Oh, and actually, I just wanted to also just give Meredith an opportunity to sort of speak to just sort of the Chamber's discussion around just the Love Pemberton, because these 2 ideas are very much married to that Love Pemberton campaign. And so I just wanted Meredith to maybe share some of the feedback that the Chamber had just generally about the Love Pemberton and us sort of backpacking on that.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Yeah, first of all, we had a board meeting last week, so I was able to, sort of bring the board up to date and share all of this with them. And, everyone's unanimous and sort of echoes what I've been saying the whole time, that, we're happy we've created something that we feel we can expand upon and share and have it expand. So we totally support leveraging the Love Pemberton further. So that makes a lot of sense to us. I think our thing is just making sure the buy local aspect doesn't get lost. Yeah, and I think we're going to really focus. There's from our end, we're just trying to look at resources. So I mean, when we looked at things, we were trying to look at them from either a resource perspective or a just how it would help the local business community. So, I don't want to get into going through each of the ideas, but we kind of looked and said, will this help businesses? What will this do to help somebody right now? And maybe some of our ideas under the economic well-being actually fit under the social side of things. But I think that's just the where we're looking at it from. Yeah, and I think just making sure too that as we use the identity with the Love Pemberton, just how do we make sure it stays somewhat intact and is expanded, who kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty, like when someone's designing things, who's working on it and who's doing things. I'd just like to know a bit more information around that. But I mean, that's the big picture. There's a lot more detailed feedback I could get into, but I think from here, just the chamber absolutely supports sharing it. I think we just want to make sure that the local message doesn't get lost. And we have plans around amplifying that and just looking at resources when we go through this. So that covers it for now.
Does anybody, and one of the things I'm going to ask in a second here, and maybe Jackie and Rodney, you could help a little with this. You know, we're getting into the big ideas, as we're calling them. We need to explore roadblocks, or Jackie, you had a different term for it, not roadblocks, but challenges, and how we could remove those roadblocks and move ahead with some of these ideas and explore what's necessary to see if they're even viable. So, you know, for instance, you know, the social well-being, we came up with this hub to join services and join people to some of the services and give them somewhere to go when they have the kind of concerns we've talked about. Is that possible? Do we have the resources? Do we have the physical space? If not, do we do a virtual space, or how does that look? So, you know, I might look to Jackie and Rodney to sort of help us break down these ideas to see how we move forward. But before I ask that on the economic well-being plan, are there any questions as to what the idea is? Like, those of you that weren't part of the discussion, read the notes, do you see where the group went with this? Does anybody have any questions? It's all pretty clear. Okay. Yeah, the idea was obviously to support our economy through our pride of place. You know, that was something that came up a lot too, is the pride of place, and you know, how can we support our local businesses from a staffing perspective, from a business, you know, revenue perspective, from a marketing perspective, but, you know, building on that love Pemberton, we felt just really tied into the pride of place that people have here. And I think very, very short version of how we got to that conclusion. So do you two facilitator types have any suggestions as to how we would move forward and break down that idea? Talking to Jackie and Rodney now.
Jackie, I've been a little out of the loop, so I'm going to let you jump in on that one.
Okay, I think I'm a little bit lost, to be honest. So the next step would be to evaluate, but my thoughts were, Jill, that you were taking that back for you and Nikki and the in-house team, I guess, at VOP to look at and to do the evaluation on it, because you guys were really the ones that had all the constraints. Did that happen? I sent you an email asking how you guys were making out, but I didn't hear anything back.
Yeah, so so Nikki, Mike, and I reviewed, but before we started getting to, we felt that we wanted to review it with the group first, just to make sure that we captured everybody's ideas and we transformed those thoughts into these ideas. So we wanted to get buy-in first before we started evaluating, and just to make sure that, you know, like I said, we captured everybody's ideas appropriately, and then we would start evaluating and then understanding what resources we can put to it.
Okay, and that goes to both ideas then. So we're still at that point where we're going to look at both ideas and make sure that you have buy-in for both ideas. Is that okay? So I would suggest then that you go into the next idea. You just see if you have buy-in for that one. I think that the evaluation stage, if we were going to do that, I didn't know we were doing that today, but if we were going to do that, then my suggestion would be that we go back into our subcommittees to do the evaluation, that we don't do it with a big group. And I would want to have my, you know, the worksheets in front of everybody so that we can do it in a systematic way instead of, yeah, that would be my suggestion. As a facilitator, I like to use a system. And so if we're going to start evaluating, then I would like to have a criteria that we're going to evaluate against. And I would actually like to do maybe a weighted SWOT, or we could use a point sheet, but we actually use a system to evaluate the idea. And going back to, do these ideas actually solve the problems that we've identified, is where thought exchange would come in. But thought exchange right now is just a great big data document that doesn't really make any sense. And so the first thing I think needs to happen is that we need to take the thought exchange and start clustering it so that we can see what goes where and how it would fit into the ideas that we came up with to see what is outside of that perimeter or what fits in. So a couple of things that were commented on was transportation and daycare. But the idea that we had with the hub actually answered those questions, and so did like the Reuse It Center, because this idea of having a hub would, people could post if they had opportunity to do anything to do with daycare, like, somebody could volunteer to take a couple extra kids, or somebody's going to Vancouver and is going to offer a ride. So there was like lots of ideas that kind of came out of those ideas, but I think we could take thought exchange and start to divide it and see if there's anything in that that doesn't fit somewhere. And then I think then we could go, okay, did our idea meet the criteria that we started with? That would be the first question. Does it do what we thought it would do? Then brainstorm on what the criteria is that we're going to measure against, because we haven't done that part yet. And then once we do that, then we would start actually doing a numerical evaluation of the ideas to see where they need to be strengthened or improved, or constraints need to be removed. So that would be sort of like that next step, if that's where we're at.
And your suggestion or your thought is that, I agree, we do that in the subcommittees. We don't do that as a full group. But to be really effective, the group needs to understand what the village's constraints are, or resource constraints might be, or access to resources. Is that sort of your thought? Is that we should break it down a little bit more from the village side before we sit in that subcommittee and do that?
Yeah, like I think that, okay, so as an example, the Love Pemberton campaign, like I was just listening to Meredith talk, and one of the things that I heard her say was that in the nitty gritty, there may be some concerns about, making sure that we keep buy local in the front of the committee, like make sure that the buy local is not lost in the Love Pemberton. And also, if we're going to start designing things, who's in control of designing those things? So those would be maybe not necessarily constraints, but concerns. And so within those concerns, we would then find ways to deal with those concerns within the big idea. So then we flesh out the big idea more, and we say, okay, well, these are two things that we need to address within the idea. And then we might brainstorm on each one of those ideas in order to strengthen that idea, to get it to a place where we can say, okay, that sounds good, and we're going to move it forward. So the brainstorming doesn't just happen in one step. It happens actually in the constraint step, because we would brainstorm the constraints, and then we would decide what constraints we have to measure against. And then once we figure out we improve the idea is the idea. So it's strengthening an idea. It's not, viable, minimal viable product that we just throw it out there and test it. We actually use time to improve the idea, to strengthen the idea, to make sure that it's going to actually work and do the thing that we wanted it to do. And then we move on that. We might brainstorm again on how we can get over any of the obstacles that we identify. So there's numerous steps that we would take. But first, before, I wasn't doing any of that stuff or ready to do any of that stuff, because I wanted you guys to look at those two ideas and say, can we live with them? Are these things that we think, because there's no point of committee doing everything if then the village of Pemberton says, no, we can't do it. We can't build a spaceship and go to Mars. That's not something we're willing to do. So it's sort of like looking at the idea and thinking about whether or not that's going to be okay. So I guess what I would say back to where we are now, one of the action items I think is that we need to take the thought exchange and break it down to look at whether we have captured the things that are in the thought exchange with these two ideas. And if we haven't, if there's things that we haven't, then look to see whether we need a third idea that we could also move forward. I then would say the next thing would be to get back into the subcommittee and to brainstorm on the constraints in order to strengthen the idea, to get it to a point where then we might be able to turn it into a project. So that's kind of where I see that we're at right now.
Awesome, that's super helpful. Thanks, Jackie. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions on what Jackie just said? Go ahead, Jay.
Sorry, gang, I've got to jump off to another meeting, but I think it just, I agree, Jackie, in terms of process around our big ideas. I am, as I know a lot of you, eager to respond and address the piece on childcare. Mayor Richmond, I think what might be an important piece is for me to connect our CCRR, which is the Childcare Resource and Referral Contact in Pemberton, with you, Jill. Because ideally that's where the province has, created a function to funnel all of the queries and concerns from parents at a provincial level, right, is through that CCRR mechanism, whether there are spaces available or not. That is the function that's in place in each community. So we hold the contract with the province for the CCRR office in Pemberton. And I think what might be important is for us to maybe put out a joint communication, Jill, just to parents around that resource, and that resource being available to parents. Communication is key right now. I think that helps a lot of us as we're faced with some of the anxieties as our children return to school. So happy to do that, Jill, but I just need to step off for now. Again, this has been super helpful, and I wish you all a good day.
Jay, can I grab you for 10 seconds before you go? The second big idea was about a hub. It came down to a physical space where we can connect. You mentioned communication. I didn't even know about the CCR. How do we connect people to these resources? That was a big part of that discussion. We spoke about a physical space to be able to do that, for people to be able to walk in, and in a virtual possibility, and we'll break it down more. But I wanted to give you a quick idea because I felt that was very much connected to your line of work. So you got to go, but
I'm also wondering what the community church is in that role, because I'm speaking with them from the food bank. Oh, that's my children. Do you see that? That's my call.
Anyway, I'd love to talk to you more about
it's a
that.
Meeting with a 5-year-old. Okay, talk to you guys soon.
Okay, bye. Okay, so any more thoughts? Go ahead, Jill.
So I'm just wondering, because like the process piece is really, really important, as Jackie pointed out, to make sure that we're addressing the needs and things like that. So I think my concern is how do we get ourselves through this process and to get into action? Because I know, like, we're on meeting 4 now. And I know that everybody's keen to get moving, but also making sure that whatever we do is meaningful and we're addressing the needs in the community, as Jackie had pointed out. So I guess my question to the committee members and to you, Mike, is how do we go through this process in an efficient way so we can move into action? Because I'm like, frankly, I'm a little worried that we haven't moved into some of those action pieces, and it's because it's been summer and everyone's been busy, and then we've had these gaps between our meetings. So I'm just wondering, is there a more efficient way? Like, do we need to carve out maybe a longer meeting to like get these done so we can get to the place where we can start actioning some of these things? Because one of the things that I was going to sort of bring up, and we can talk about it later, is with next steps, is I think, we've had our 4th meeting. We haven't really done any reporting to the community on what we're actually doing. And so I think it would be really great to be able to start to do that reporting back to the committee or to the community. So I guess, I think that's my question to the group is, do we have the ability to carve out some extra time to get this process, to do our important processes so we can move into action? I'm sounding like you now, Mike, but that's my concern, because I know that everybody has been amazing in carving out this time for our meetings, but how do we, I really want to go through the process to make sure we're doing the right thing.
You can do worse than sound like me, by the way. It's not a terrible thing. No, totally agree with Jill. And again, we don't want to overtax you, and we also want to make sure that all of you feel that your time is being well spent and that we're producing something of value. So just along the line, hearing what Jackie suggested for process and Jill's question, what's the group's thoughts here? Are we able to break back into our subcommittees? We can do our work from the village side that Jackie mentioned in terms of identifying resources or what's not even a possibility, or we could do that, I think, fairly quickly. in time for other subcommittee meetings. Are we able and willing to break back into our subcommittees very quickly for a good fulsome meeting to go through the process that Jackie described sooner than later and push ourselves into action? How do people feel about that?
Can we ask Jackie what her timeline's like? If she's going to be taking us through all of these, it would be good to know your availability, Jackie.
Great question. I'm actually in September. I'm going to do the couple of days with the village, but I also am starting a huge project for, believe it or not, Space Force. So the US Air Force has a thing. It's not just a TV show. It's actually real. It's crazy, called Space Force. And we're going to be working for the whole month of September with them. But so my feeling is that, yes, we need to move this along, and it is definitely dragging on, which is probably making people feel anxious. I think people feel anxious if they don't get to speak about things that are on their mind, but I think they also feel anxious if they don't feel that things are moving forward. I know my anxiety level goes up if I feel like we're not really getting somewhere. I need to see that we're doing something. And so what I would like to suggest is that we break into 2 groups and that we do an evaluation. But I think first, I really do think, because I think you're right. I don't know who said it, whether it was Nikki or Jill, but we did go out to the community to ask people what they thought, which was in the thought exchange. And I think that it would be really negligent not to take that thought exchange now and distill the information, because that's what we haven't analyzed it. You know, we've got all the information, but I think it really needs to be distilled and perhaps put into categories like, this is all to do with transportation. This is all to do with food security. This is all to do with seniors. Like, I think we need to kind of pull it out and put it into those clusters and then use those for our evaluation criteria. Like, I think that we need to bring all of that back into the next step that we're going to go through, which would be the evaluation. And maybe that can be done really quickly. I don't know, because I know that that's a really super tool. I just don't know it well enough to know how quickly. Maybe it's already been sorted. I'm not sure, but that would be my suggestion. And then I think that the committees, as we break them in half again, we take from the thought exchange what we think would impact or what would be addressed with the ideas that we have, so that we can pull those things back in and use them to strengthen the ideas that we have and improve the ideas that we have. Because the big idea that we have has not yet been improved. It's just sort of like a baby that needs to be nurtured. It needs to be cleaned up. It needs to be matured, and it needs to get to a place. So that's the next step. So if people were looking at that sheet, the next step is we would evaluate. And in evaluation, we're going to strengthen the idea. Then the step after that is we actually do planning. So the planning step is the next step that we would do. Then the next step should be stakeholder engagement. And that's when we start looking at who else is out there that should be brought in to help deliver what it is that we plan on delivering. The very last step is action, but at least we go to action. Now, what I would suggest is that we think about what can we do quickly and easily, and what would be something that's not going to be, maybe some quick wins, just so that it can start paving the way for some of the bigger things to follow. So instead of taking the biggest, hairiest monster first and trying to do that, I think from a burnout point of view, if we can start doing some small things that start checking a few things off the list quickly. I don't know what those things are because we're not at that step yet, but that's what I would suggest, because I think that would make everybody on this committee feel like the hours that have already been put into this are actually taking us to a thing. So so that would be my suggestion, is to take the thought exchange, break it down, try to cluster it. I don't know who is going to do that, but that would be the first thing. Then break into the 2 subcommittees, and to do that relatively quickly, so that we can, I have holes in my schedule. It's not like I'm completely bombarded next month, but I just want to make sure that this is moving forward, because I am going to get distracted by something else in short order.
So one quick question, Jackie, and then question for the group. When evaluation in the subcommittees, the planning step, is that part of the subcommittee or is that the greater group?
I think that the evaluation should be next. One of the things I think has come across is that in the planning, if we can get both committees to do the evaluation, when we get to planning, that's when I think we can come back together as a group, because it could be cross-pollination of things that need to happen that could all be project managed.
Okay, so next question to Jill and Nikki. Do we feel we have the capacity at the village to A, work on that spreadsheet, and B, sort of run through the ideas and look at resources at a high level at this point? Obviously, we'd have to look for others after, but just to sort of be able to inform the subcommittee work. Finish the sentence by, I was going to propose, if people are open to it, subcommittee meetings for the week of September 8th.
So sorry, I was, for my silence, I was just looking. So on Thought Exchange, as you'll see on that spreadsheet that has all the comments, at the beginning, I kind of already had put them into those sort of subcategories. I just sort of made them up basically, just based on sort of the more common themes. So I think what might be helpful, if possible, is to find out if these themes are still appropriate or if I should be grouping them in another way.
I think we need to take that offline though, Jill. I think with all of us commenting and looking about it, I think we bring back some, maybe we have a childcare theme and a transportation theme. We break it out a little bit more.
I don't mind helping you guys with that too.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of like, maybe try to do it this week. I just want to put the gas on that a bit if we can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think.
May I jump in? It's Mark.
Can I just want to add a comment first, Mark, because I need to know what our rules are or what we need to do as far as the village's capacity or resources towards, we're talking about Thought Exchange. Because some of these things we could bring forward, I won't know unless we have a project. Say there's something really, something that we all agree, and then we go to council and we say, well, we need to find funds for this, or there's a grant funding for this. So we wouldn't be able to necessarily split those apart and say we do or we do not have resources. Obviously, other than it's a 6-month project and it takes one dedicated staff member, I would say, no, we don't have that, right? Like, but if there's money involved, we potentially could fund some somewhere.
I think that's an important point because we don't know whether it's money or
time or
maybe staff, maybe space.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted Jay to hear that idea really quickly, because I think she has something to offer when it comes to a potential physical space. Because that big idea, when we talked about that, I went, where's that going to be? Our community center is closed. How do we do that? So when I walked away from that meeting, I went, that one might be too big. But then through further thought, it's like, well, maybe through Sea Sky Community Services, maybe collectively we could come up with something. So I agree with Nikki, knowing exactly what resources I think this group can inform what kind of resources are available, what kind of grant funding is available. So go ahead, Mark.
Jill, congratulations, because the Thought Exchange document I thought is very well done. I simply ranked it. I resorted it, and number one on there that the community is asking for, the only thing I think is missing is how many spoke to this. How many in that survey spoke to this, is the Reuse It Center. I think that is and could be the biggest accomplishment that we could put together for the community, is to reinstate a Reuse It Center. There's 2 locations that I can think of. One beside the gas station, that's been vacant forever, and whether or not there's an opportunity. And I'm certain that there's a worship center up on the hill that they might be interested in hosting on a temporary basis, a Reuse It Center for the community needs. That might provide us with the hub location. So I look at that Thought Exchange document and I see we could take the top 5, we could take the top 10. I don't think there's any way we could take this entire document and attempt to do something with it in the short term. It would be years to try to figure out the entire document, I think. But certainly, I think we could make a huge impact on simply the top 5 anyway. And that's what the community has spoken to. I mean, that's what they've asked for. This has been out there long enough that I think the response has been pretty big. I'm not sure the numbers, but I think it has been pretty big. So perhaps we can incorporate the reuse it center as part of what we're trying to do here, because I think people are missing it, want it, and it serves a real public interest. My thoughts.
Who do we just lose?
I think it was Rodney.
Oh, yeah. So do we feel as a group that, back up to Jackie's suggestion, we work through the spreadsheet, we separated, so we sift through ideas like Mark just mentioned, keep them top of mind. And again, Mark, there's no way any of us feel that we can tackle the whole document, as you put it. Again, some of them might just be conversations and things that we connect with other people in the community about. But Jackie's suggestion, prioritize, sort that document out, have a quick chat about what the village is doing or can offer or can't offer, and then break back into our subcommittees and work through that evaluation process and bring it back as a greater group. So in that anxiousness to get it done, do we feel we can meet in our subcommittees on the week of September 7th? Is that, and you don't all have to answer right now, I just want to get a sense for whether it's even feasible. Most people feel that
it works for me. Can we please do it on a Wednesday? I mean, that's my only ask.
We'll put out the doodle poll again there for both, but in the spirit of trying to get some stuff done here, again, if Jackie could work a little bit with Jackie and Jill, we can get this going for the first week of September. Is everybody good with that? We've talked a little bit about the economic well-being and building on the Love Pemberton campaign and using that. We haven't talked, the other idea we've touched on as well, but it's that hub for tying together some of the concerns and challenges as well as services within the community. Does anybody have anything they wanted to either ask about that idea or throw into that idea before we move on that?
Maybe I'll just jump in and say that that the hub idea, it doesn't have to be a physical space. It can be virtual. And I think that perhaps, we might start with virtual because of COVID and then move to physical later. But just to go back to Mark's point about everybody wanting the Reuse It Center, like I think that's a brilliant idea, and it's probably something that we could do virtually where people could put their stuff up. It's getting things to people, but then maybe there's people that will volunteer to do delivery services. Like, I think that there's lots of ideas within all of this that if people know what we're looking for, and if we have a place to ask for it, that we might find that a lot of the things that we think, oh, we can't do that because we don't have this, it then turns out that somebody puts their hand up and says, well, we can help with that. So I think that thinking about these ideas, this whole idea of a virtual hub is also really relevant. And I'm happy to work with Nikki and Jill to, go through that idea exchange to get it to a point where we know what could go to each subcommittee. And then I'm also happy to work with the subcommittees. It may have to be in the afternoon, but I'm just looked at my schedule quickly, and I can certainly spend some time. But I think that we need to move a bit on this. Like, having the meetings are great, and talking and sharing information is great. But for me to feel like I'm contributing, I want to see something happening. So I'm going to push us in that direction a bit. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents worth. So.
Jackie, question for you. Would it make sense for us to have those two working group sessions happen concurrently at the same time, and then have us join back together after that?
The only problem is, Jill, I can't be in two places at the same time. And so I think that if we're going to follow that process of evaluation, otherwise I think what'll happen is you'll get into a thinking soup.
Yeah.
So I think that if we can stick with the sheet and work through the sheet and actually do like we teach an entire program on evaluation. So it's like, it's not an easy thing to do. But I think that we've got some worksheets that we can use, and I think that we can do it relatively quickly if we follow a system. So I'm happy to help. I just can't be in two places at once, but yeah, so happy to do it. But we do need, and I don't know that we need more time. I just think we need focused time.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts at this point? So what I'm hearing is that we're going to try to establish both working group meetings the first week of September. I think Jill's suggestion was to flow right into the big group. I don't know if we can pull all that off in 1 week, but we can try if people are willing. If not, I would say it's the very next week so that we keep momentum.
Yeah. I think we're going to need an opportunity to pull the information together in order to bring it to the bigger group. So I think we're going to need a few days. So if it's the next week, then.
Okay, so let's be aggressive and shoot for subcommittee meetings. So I'm just looking at my calendar. The week of, well, September 7th. September 7th is Labor Day, so following Labor Day, and then that's an ugly week. The next week, and then try to do something the next week. Is everybody okay with that? Is that too ambitious, or is everybody good with that?
My time is going to get really used up, like by the time we get to the 13th. So by the 13th, the 14th of September, I'm probably going to have to go dark, but I'm happy to work as much as I can up until then.
Okay.
How about, can you just give Nikki and I some time after this meeting just to sort of look at our, like what we can make possible?
Yeah, let's look at some dates. I mean, I guess the bottom line is let's get that evaluation process started and book the group meeting right after as soon as possible. So if the group's okay with that, we'll do what Jill just said and take some time to look through the calendar, I guess, and put out an invitation. Yeah, I just, you know, again, I want to check in with everybody here. And Jackie said, you know, as we feel we don't make action, that's when the anxiety level moves up. And I feel like we've all sort of said it in one way or another. We're patient-ish with the process, but we do want to see ourselves moving on. But is everybody still feeling okay with being part of all this? Everybody still good? Okay. Judith, did you have your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, I'm going to be in a tiny cabin 5 miles from Keslow. There's supposed to be internet, but there might not be. I mean, I will try and make whatever time you have, but just to let you know that. And yes, about the anxiety, I guess that's why I jumped in and said I'd do that stuff at the grocery store, because I felt got to get some action going.
So where do we want to go from here? I mean, the next item was next steps. I think we're covering that right now. Just trying to get back to my agenda. Yeah, basically it's next steps and then meeting dates, which we will do the usual. Is there any appetite for those that are in the area to meet physically?
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, so when we put out the invite, can we put out an invite saying physical or not physical attendance? Can you do that with a doodle poll?
Not really. You can only kind of just do dates. But I mean, it's looking like Judith or Jackie, sorry, you were saying something.
No, sorry, I missed the question. Was it, are we going to meet physically for the next one? Is that what you asked, Mike?
Pretty much. I'm assuming that not everybody would be able to do it, but those that are able, is there a willingness to meet physically for the subcommittee meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll put that on. If you can't, we'll set it up. I mean, if we could do it in our boardroom, Nikki, can we set up the big screen for that?
Oh, you're on mute, Nikki.
I can't remember the occupancy, 4 or 5 people maybe.
I think it's at least 5. I thought it was 6, but do we have, with our new television there, we could put everybody else up on the big screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
We also maybe, I don't know if we can use the community center.
Oh, we have to pay
More
for it, so we
people-
need to be conscious of that.
Right.
Well, we could, I'm sure, you know, somebody in the PVIS committee can suggest waiving those fees if we need to.
Well, we'd need to do an application for a grant, but we can bring that forward if you'd like.
I can take that.
Okay.
But I'm not worried about those fees. We'll work on that. But if we don't, I mean, I think council chambers would be great. We have the TV for those that are virtual. But if not, we'll look at the community center. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, I just feel like there's more people that are willing to be in person and will exceed our capacity. That's
right.
I'm gauging
Well,
right now in my hands.
Fair enough.
The library has a big screen and people aren't in there at the moment and there's enough space in there.
There you go. Maybe we could tap into that. Okay, well, we'll figure that one offline as well. But there is an appetite to meet live is what I'm hearing. There is an appetite to get things rolling again further. So we'll look at that first week of September. I don't really have much else. With that said, Jill, Nikki, Jackie, you good with all that? Okay. Any comments from the group then? Everybody's okay with the way where we're going. Again, it feels slower than we might like, but I still feel like we're moving as long as everybody's still on board. You know, again, I had a moment of, oh shit, Mike, maybe you went too broad on this. You know, my thought at the very beginning was, let's not just focus on economy. Let's focus on social fabric and all those sorts of things in mental health. And then when I watched us go through the process over the last 3 meetings, I sort of got worried that it was a little too broad, a little too ambitious. But as long as everybody's still on board and we're good, then let's set our subcommittee meetings and move ahead. And Judith, you're going to connect with Jill with regards to the grocery stores offline. Jackie, you'll connect with Nikki and Jill in terms of timing for the spreadsheet and setting up our next steps with the evaluation meeting. And obviously, Jill, you have the enviable job of getting everybody a date.
Can I just ask, what are we approaching the grocery stores on again?
Jill?
Oh, sorry. So Judith and I had raised just with respect to the cold weather, and you know, would there be an opportunity for the grocery store to either provide a delivery service or perhaps like a shop and pick up service? Yeah, so just to see what options may be there, or what services the grocery stores can offer to help perhaps our single moms or seniors, those displaced, etc.
Okay. Okay. I would think that they're already thinking about things like that, but yeah, for sure. Okay. Okay. All right.
That's one thing I just wanted to add, like as we go, when we get to the evaluation stage and we start that, is maybe just really saying, you know, what is going on out there already that we can amplify and piggyback on versus, you know, reinventing it and really looking at it through that lens. Like I know we can do it when we get to that part of the process, but you know, just making sure we're not duplicating things, but you know, elevating them and communicating them, like Jay was saying too, that like sharing and communicating, because a lot of the time these things are there and we just don't know, and people don't know where to find them, and that's where I see the value of the hub.
I agree entirely with you, Meredith. I feel like that's one of the biggest parts of our work. I didn't know where we were going to go when we started this committee. I wasn't really in my head seeing us do any major project. I saw us doing what you just said, tying together existing programming, tying together services. That's why we came up with the hub idea on the social well-being thing, because I think that really helps accomplish that. But leading people to services, connecting to each other for support of any sort, from food delivery to emotional support to childcare, to enhancing the stuff that's going on out there. I think that's one of the biggest things, and that's why our broad reach of this group, I think, can accomplish that. We want to tackle a project or two at the same time. That's great. I feel like that project will be the umbrella for what you just said, which is really enhancing, not duplicating, not reinventing the wheel, but building on what's out there. And then again, using our connections to broaden it.
I also, if I could just jump in, I think that one of the things that if we think about the most vulnerable members of our community as we're designing things, so Judith, you know, the information that you bring is really important, because when we design or we come up with ideas, if those ideas and suggestions meet the needs of, let's say, seniors or persons with disabilities, it turns out that it helps everybody, like, you know, single moms and people that just don't have access. So I think that that information is super helpful. So if you're at your cabin next week and you don't have the internet connection, if you can even just, whenever we meet, if you can even just call in by phone, that could be really helpful. And I also think too that there's a lot of wisdom with the seniors, because just thinking about Meredith's comment, there are so many things that we have learned to forget over time that are key things that we just have now got into this habit where we were able to go grocery shopping every day, or we were able to just, you know, order up whatever we want from Amazon. And now all of those things are coming to an end. And I think that seniors forever, they were the first recyclers. They recycled before recycling was a thing because they had to. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that population that we also can capture. So I think this is great. I think we've got a good variety of people on the calls that sort of, you know, have interesting backgrounds and are going to speak for different groups of people that need help and that need the support, which then will ultimately help everybody. So I think we're on the right track.
Thanks, Jackie. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions before we wrap it up?
I just want to say I'm looking forward to the next subcommittee meeting. I've been thinking about lots of different ideas through the thought exchange, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. And as everybody else is, just would like to start, start putting some results, on the table.
I just wanted to say, is there going to be a breakout daycare or childcare meeting then or something? Was that?
Well, the idea was, I think, through evaluating the thought exchange and recognizing the prevailing, the strongest themes that we want to have, I think the idea was, hey, let's get our subcommittees doing the work that we just described. But then on top of that, anybody that's willing to say, I would like to be part of a breakout group to talk about daycare. Once we've seen that spreadsheet, I think was the idea. Was that the step to get there? Jill, Nikki, is that what we were thinking? Like let's evaluate those themes and then.
Yeah, I think the idea would be is that, again, I need some time to put together some thoughts on what those themes are in the thought exchange, but I think through that we'll be able to extract some ideas or suggestions of thought exchange that could be plunked into daycare, and then that group could sort of analyze and determine what they want to take on or what the next steps are. So let us, we want to basically have the full picture before we have that daycare group get together and discuss.
And I think part of Jackie's process, as she described it, it will, when we go through that process, we'll sort of identify what parts of the thought exchange themes are getting captured in these big ideas as well. That might therefore not require a breakout group because they're going to get absorbed into that. Is that a fair comment, Jackie?
Yeah, and I think likewise, we're going to find, once we start clustering and sorting, we're going to find that there's things that we didn't address. And so those will be the ones that maybe would require a subcommittee to go through the same process of coming up with ideas and brainstorming and coming up with some kind of a suggestion. And then who knows, maybe it will fit back into one of the other committees or big ideas, or maybe it won't. Maybe that's something that we go, hey, this is something really important that we haven't dealt with, and we need to have another process where we address it. So there's no end to this process. We can keep, even when we go to action, if you think of it this way, as soon as you go to action and we start doing something, a whole bunch more problems will fall out of that, which we can then run through the process again. So it's sort of like, you have to start thinking of things like a system, because our whole community is a system and everything we do is going to be a system. Everything impacts on everything else. So that's why the task force is so important, is because everyone comes from a different angle to look at things. But there's no, we're never going to say, oh, it's over, because maybe this will never be over. Maybe this task force will stay together even after COVID. You know, we might be, this might just be the beginning of something, a problem solving group that hangs out in Pemberton and tackles all the messy problems that come up, and does it in a collective way so that we have voices from every walk of our community. So it's hard to know where it'll go, but I just want everybody to feel that assured that if there are problems that we have not addressed, that doesn't mean we're not going to address them. It just means that that they're the next ones to fall out that we'll deal with.
So the discussion around, hey, let's have a breakout conversation on daycare or whatever it is, that happens after the evaluation meetings as a big group, you figure, Jackie?
Well, I think we'll get clarity. Right now, we don't have any clarity. We're like, well, we should maybe talk about transportation, or maybe we should talk about daycare, or maybe we should talk about the Reuse It Center. I think those kinds of things, I definitely think those conversations should happen, but let's see what we've got right now. And then we can kind of look at where we are when we start evaluating the two ideas, and then we can figure out what we missed. And then we can decide how we want to address it. But that would be where we then say, let's do a small committee to deal with daycare. I mean, my problem is I'm interested in everything. So I'm like, I want to go on the daycare committee. I want to go on the Reuse It committee. I want to go on the Love Pemberton committee. Like I love all of it. So all of it is super interesting. But I just think that probably we need to do it step by step so that we can get to everything.
Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay. Well, and any closing thoughts before I give my closing thought? Okay. I just want to repeat. I think, you know, we've gone through a thought process today again where a number of us have expressed our feelings of, call it impatience or anxiousness. Thanks, everyone. We will get there and we will see results, whether they're, you know, in the form of a project or just, like I say, connecting and as Meredith put it, enhancing other works that's going on out there. We're going to get there. So thanks for your patience with the process, everybody. Let's keep hammering away. We'll get it done. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn? Judith, seconded by Jackie. All in favor, opposed, we're adjourned. Thanks again, you guys. We'll talk soon.